Kia ora koutou katoa. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia maa kina kina ki uta, kia maa taratara ki tai. E hi ake ana te atakura. He tio, he huka, he ho hu, ti he Māori ora. I'm Sarah Sinclair, your MC for today. It is absolutely fantastic to have everyone together for today's event. As you would have seen, we have a packed agenda for you today, and you are going to hear from our 6 CEs as they discuss key initiatives to address network transformation and how they're collaborating to support customers. You're also going to have ample time for questions at the end. Before I start, and I've had a bit of an insight into what these guys are going to talk about, and this is super exciting. I am going to introduce the 6 CEs, and they are going to talk to you about this changing landscape that they're facing into. We've got Andrew McLeod, who's Chief Executive of North Power, Russell Shaw, CE of Top Energy, Mike Fox, who's Acting Chief Executive of the Lines Company, Simon McKenzie, Chief Executive of Vector, Sean Horgan, Chief Executive of Waipa Networks, and Judy Nicol, Chief Executive of Counties Energy. So let's kick off the formal proceedings. I just want to take a couple of minutes first to share with you an overview of the Northern Energy Group, represented by the Chief Executives here, for those who are not aware. The Northern Energy Group is a collection of 6 EDBs covering geographically just the top of the North Island, from Tikawiti to Cape Reinga. But the group importantly distributes energy to more than 45% of New Zealand's energy customers. The NEG is committed to finding new ways to deliver for consumers for the nearly 800,000 ICPs they serve across their regions. The NEG needs to be aligned as a group. They expect 11% population and ICP growth in the next 10 years, and they're focused on collaboration. The NEG is ready to serve this growth with $4.5 billion of capital spend forecast in the next 10 years. Finally, the NEG EDBs are all partly owned by customers, and over the past 10 years, they've returned $1.5 billion in dividends to their customers. We're very committed to this session being a really engaging session, so we really want to encourage you to ask any questions that you have of this team. There are 2 ways that you can do this. There is a tab for attendees to enter their questions at any time during the event. We'll pick these up in the Q&A session later. Or you can also ask your questions live during the Q&A session. So let's go and let's hear from the EDBs. Here is our first video, which is from North Power, focusing on ADMS and the collaboration around ADMS with other EDBs.
An advanced distribution management system is a development, I guess, in the industry. It's the latest generation of tools for controlling the electricity network. And these systems started out with SCADA systems, so supervisory control and data acquisition systems. The idea that we've got telemetered equipment out there in our substations and key points on our network that we can control from a central control room. If we're going to deliver these future visions of introducing distributed energy resources onto our network, of having lots of cars out there, lots of batteries, and being able to work effectively to drive these savings, we had to make a start by putting in place these big systems that are capable of doing it, this advanced distribution management system. It not only controls the high voltage equipment on the network, it also gives us visibility into a distribution network and allows us to manage that electronically. And it's got the tool sets and it's got the capabilities for us to then plug in these other types of resources that are going to be on our network and then effectively direct electricity around the network. And that's all about trying to ultimately be smarter and reduce costs. We need to meet the challenges of tomorrow with what's happening with electricity, with distributed energy resources, with solar PVs, batteries, everything that's coming. So being able to look at what another EDB has done and take their solution is a huge head start. It means we can just focus on what we need to do, the bits of the solution that we need to tweak for our business, and then we don't need to worry about the rest of it. We can just trust that works. If it's been done elsewhere, in other EDBs in New Zealand, we know it will work. We've been able to really piggyback on some of those big guys, some of the big guys that have gone before us, the Orions, the Well Networks, Wellington Electricity, Top Energy, implemented the system before we did, and we were simply able to, collaborate. So both Top Energy and ourselves took the same system that the other EDBs before us had implemented, and that was a huge advantage to us. We looked to our neighbours and we asked, the door was open. The end vision here is all about making it better for our customers, making it better for our consumers, giving them the tools they need to have these batteries, the cars, the panels on the roof at home and take advantage of that between the retailers and ourselves.
Thank you, North Power, for that great video, which really does show a future vision using collaboration with customers at the heart. So, now to tell you a little bit more, we have Andrew McLeod, CE of North Power, and Russell Shaw, CE of Top Energy. Nice to have you both with us today.
Thank you, Sarah. You'll get a sense from that prior video of just how close we work together in terms of EDBs. There was a whole list of EDBs that have had that ADMS system, and Russell will talk about in a while, but we literally did pull the system down, put it onto North Power's platform, and it just ran. So it saved us millions and saved us years of engineering. So great example. But the other piece I want to talk about, and this is another example of collaboration, is the renewable energy zone work we've been doing in very, very close partnership with Russell and his team at Top, and with Transpower, who are running the national consultation around renewable energy zones. And we wanted to give it a little bit of a personal flavour because Russell and I, we live in the north, we raise our families in the north. We really do stand for those communities and doing the absolute right thing in terms of long-term infrastructure planning and energy planning. So we think it's a great opportunity to create an opportunity for communities to be involved in the future of energy and really have a very personal stake. So something that's very, very close to our hearts is that long-term planning of what could be possible, how could we involve communities. So let's talk a little bit about the what. What are we trying to achieve through renewable energy zones? We'll talk just shortly in terms of what the concept is. I know this is a pretty expert audience, so you'll have an idea of the detail underneath. So we'll just stay very, very high level. But the goal of renewable energy zones for Northland, and we'll keep that focus on it because it is a wider national initiative, is to be able to really realise the potential of our regions in New Zealand in support of decarbonisation. So there's easily in excess of 2 gigawatts of renewable energy up north, if you count wind, if you count solar right across the region, if you count geothermal, which is up in Russell's area. That is a huge resource. Northland uses about 200 megawatts peak at the moment, so we're talking about 10 times more energy available in that region than we even use. Now that's wonderful for the north in terms of a growing population and being able to enable energy and infrastructure, but actually it's wonderful for the North Island because if we can export energy down to Auckland rather than bring it all the way up from the South Island, it really does help with pricing. It helps with just a much more sensible solution for resilient energy supply. So that's what we're trying to do. We're saying, what would it take to unlock that 2 gigawatts over time? It's probably a 20-year initiative. And let's get on with it, and let's actually collaborate with the people around us to make this a reality. And we're promoting the idea of a pilot in Northland. That's a Transpower decision about where that pilot would be. We'd love to have it in Northland because our community is very, very dialed into this. They see it as a great opportunity for the potential for ownership, the potential to grow careers and construction around that whole area. And they're just waiting for this to tick off. So we're very excited about it. I'll talk quickly about the concept, but I want to make it simple because it is simple. The resource is there. There's people turning up as we speak saying we'd like to build these plants. On Russell's area, he's already got, I think, 6 megawatts of rooftop solar. He's got applications for 90 megawatts of plant ready to go. In our region, we've got 8 megawatts rooftop, and we've got around 200 renewable applications just sitting waiting to go. Now, the idea of a renewable energy zone is a couple of things. Just draw a circle around a region and say, hey, that would be a great place to do renewables, which would say, yes, pick the north. And secondly, let's just get the rules and the commercial rules working so that you can take a slice of the cost, because there is a cost to upgrade distribution networks, transmission networks, if you want to plug in over time 2 gigawatts energy. But do it in a way that you pay a slice of the cost rather than having to go through and pay mega bucks if you're the first person, which is currently the case. We think it's pretty doable. We've done a lot of the engineering and the thinking about how this could be done, but it really needs to be brought to life through a pilot. But Russell, I'll pass over to you to give it a little bit more depth. This is just, as I said at the start, an example of collaboration, and we've done a lot more together with TOP. So over to you, Russell.
Thanks very much. As Andrew said, this is a massive opportunity for Northland, and it's when you look at how we're going to decarbonise New Zealand, we don't want to leave anyone behind. And at the moment, the lines in Top Energy's network and out of our network are fully committed. And where we have a large Maori population, about 50% of the far north is Maori, and they're developing their own energy strategies, they can't get into this now. They can't do things like solar, and they want to. So we really see this as an important enabler to allow that equity in the energy transformation that we're all working towards. But that's just one of the things that we've been working on together. It's a great example of how we work directly with North Power and with Transpower, but it's just one of those things. And I wanted to cover off some of the others. So we've got a lot of solar up north. That's what's really driving the change for us, the decarbonisation change. It's not electric vehicles. I've said it a number of times before, the far north is where vehicles come to die. For us, it's solar. It's a beautiful place with lots of sunshine and lots of solar installation. Andrew mentioned 6 megawatts domestic solar. We're actually up at 8.5 now, and that's how quickly these things are moving. So we've been working closely with other lines companies to standardise how we connect solar, both domestic connections, where most of it has been to date, but also we've got over 90 megawatts now of large-scale solar that's coming across the network. And that's going to change how we have to manage the network because we have a single point of connection with Transpower, and then anything in the network is up to us to organise as the distribution system operator. So we've been working closely on standardisation of those standards. We've also been looking at our pricing strategy and getting alignment across the groups that you see here, so that we want to make this as easy as we possibly can for our customers, and ultimately from those customers through to the end consumers. So if we've all got different pricing standards and pricing strategies, that just makes it hard. It adds to the cost for retailers, and that reduces the competition, and ultimately it's the customers who lose out. So we've done a lot of work in standardising those strategies and moving that forward. You've heard a bit about the ADMS configuration and the setup. I used to do a lot of benchmarking, and this kind of strap line for benchmarking is stealing shamelessly. And we kind of do that. So we took the best we could from Well Networks. When I was at Well Networks, we took the best we could from some of the South Australian companies. And those systems have rolled out. And it's really key for how we move forward, and particularly how we move to that distribution system operator. Standardised systems, standardised technology stack. And once I've got it in my business, what's the point trying to sell it to someone else's? So we've taken the very clear view that when we develop the IP, we just hand it on. We hand it on, and they'll hand it on, and then hand it on. And through that, we'll get standardisation. And that's been really, really successful. And you saw the list of just how many companies have put that common technology stack in place. And we did the same with the CRM system, which is Salesforce, and a slightly broader group. Broader than the Northern Energy Group. We brought some of the South Island companies into that. So EA Networks are in there, Network Waitaki are in there, and PowerCo as well. So again, standardising the approach so that there's a common approach for the customers. We've just been to market for call centre telephony, and we'll have a standard system across Top Energy and North Power. And we also collaborate on things like the rescue helicopter, which you can see here. Now, we've been doing that for almost 30 years. So this isn't a new thing. This is what we do as lines companies. And then the last area I wanted to pick up was the alignment on our operation and technical standards. So if you come into Top Energy's network, it's the same technical standard and operational procedures that you have if you've come from North Power. And for us, that's really, really important where you've got areas like storm response. So we get hit by cyclones and we need to bring resources in from outside the region. We want the same control systems. We want the same operating protocols. So all of this is focused on saying, well, how do we ensure that we can move to the future, move to decarbonisation in a common way and make this easier for customers? So that's the driving force behind the collaboration. It helps us keep our costs down to customers, and that gives us the common technology stack to move forward. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Andrew and Russell. That was so exciting. You may know that I sit on the Infrastructure Commission, so to see the conversation around long-term planning, the RESs, decarbonisation and standardisation, that is truly exciting stuff. So music to my ears, in fact. So to close this session, we're now going to see a video from Top Energy about solar collaboration between the EDBs to standardise their operating standards.
Solar for Top Energy is a really big thing, and it's getting bigger and bigger. In the last 6 months, we've had more solar generation input on the network from customers' own installations than we'd had in the entire year previous. And if it keeps going at the rate it's going now, it's going to be a very, very big part of our business. The industry as a whole has realised that we need to work together, especially around health and safety. All of the installations have to be done to a standard and use approved equipment that is built to Australian and New Zealand standards to just ensure, firstly, safety to customers and to the guys working in the field, the field crews, and then to prevent damage to people's appliances in their houses or their installations themselves. Being able to collaborate with your neighbouring EDBs is definitely going to be a lot more cost effective and efficient for the customers. No one's going to be reinventing the wheel. Everyone's going to be working to just improve the same wheel. It's going to be a big rollout throughout New Zealand, I think, over the next 10 to 15 years, solar, and the two companies can stand proud of what they've done so far and definitely look to the future of what they're going to carry on doing together. I guess in the past, EDBs have been more competitors, but looking to the future, I think the industry as a whole has realised that we need to work together, especially around health and safety, which is how we get through a lot of our stuff in the industry is by collaborating. So Top Energy and North Power always seem to have done it well, and they're definitely striving to push even better into the future, to use everyone's rooftop as part of a solar farm and then think about the on-flow effects of that is quite a cool thing, and we're at the start of something that could be really exciting for the future for everyone.
Thank you, Top Energy, for your video. That is a crazy cool thing. Next up, we will hear from Mike Fox, who's the acting CEO of the Lines Company. They're going to tell us about their collaborative solar DER project with the Maniapoto Māori Trust Board.
Thanks, Sarah. So, collaborative energy. The Lines Company manages one of New Zealand's most challenging networks. It's expansive, covers some incredibly tough yet visually spectacular terrain. Our network is small by comparison to some of our neighbouring networks, yet our demand is set to increase by up to 30% over the next 5 years. High levels of social deprivation with energy affordability are a real concern in large parts of our network. So nearly 3/4 of our customers are in areas characterised by deprivation scores of 7 or higher, and that's a trend which is compounded by the current cost of living crisis. We're focused on enabling customers to connect distributed energy resources to our network, helping to facilitate decarbonisation and provide equitable energy solutions. However, for many, roof-mounted solar systems aren't an option due to geographic challenges, cost to purchase panels and battery storage, the lack of suitable housing stock for installation, and the changeable weather, which is often prevalent during winter months, which impacts on those solar gains. So leveraging MBIE's Māori Housing Renewable Energy Fund, together with iwi, we're trialling a collaborative approach to generation and sharing of renewable energy. Working together, the project aims to support one of Maniapoto Māori Trust Board's Pautahua, or Strategy and Development, which prioritises focus on long-term whānau wellbeing. Through the solar energy pilot, we'll be able to use the insights and data to help inform future energy approaches for iwi. So the pilot project sees solar panels installed on two marae, with the energy generated from those panels shared through a trading platform. And that enables the marae to gift surplus energy to households of their choice anywhere on our network. And each of those 18 kilowatt solar arrays contributes towards the energy costs of 5 households. First installation took place in late August at Maniaroa Marae, located north of Moko, the tribal area of Moko ki Runga Rohi, representing hapu from Ngāti Rake, Ngāti Waiora, Ngāti Waikorara and Rungatirangi. The coastal settlement area also features ideal conditions for renewable solar generation. So as kaitiaki, or guardians of the area's renewable resources, iwi want to ensure that sustainable approach to Māori energy outcomes. They're doing this by collaborating with TLC to harness the sun's natural resources, delivering it to people who would not otherwise be able to access solar energy. Solutions set to deliver a host of benefits, including reduced energy costs, improved health and wellbeing through accessible energy, greater understanding of DER and its benefits, and the provision of a reliable, secure energy source. The project itself will also improve TLC's knowledge and expertise for larger scale solar DER projects, increase accessibility for customers to generate renewable energy, and provide positive outcomes for customers. As an NEG member, we're keen to share our plans and experience with other EDBs and make that information available as part of the ENA's Innovation Stocktake. Look forward to sharing the progress as we go from here.
Thanks so much, Mike. I think everyone found that absolutely a fantastic animation, and those deprivation statistics are so confronting, and to see that equitable energy solution using data and technology is fantastic. Next we have a video from Vector on how they are collaborating to lift cybersecurity maturity of the energy industry.
Cybersecurity is very important to the energy sector. We're operating in an increasingly complex threat landscape, and cybersecurity issues are probably one of the most pressing risks that's going to be faced across our entire sector. There's certainly a resource shortage in the cybersecurity industry, and so we're naturally starting to collaborate to share resources and gain access to that hard-to-find type talent. The cybersecurity team here at Vector, they have always participated in industry forums, cybersecurity events, and other activities to increase threat intelligence sharing, communication, education across our entire industry. But much more recently, Vector has had the opportunity to bring cybersecurity firms and partners together with other EDBs and run a series of events where those events have been aimed at increasing the amount of communication and collaboration across the different members inside our sector. Using common sets of processes, common people, common technology and common partners drives efficiency. It drives efficiency from the ability to react and respond in the case of a cybersecurity incident. It drives efficiency from the preparedness for a cybersecurity incident, but it also drives cost efficiency. The engineers here that work at Vector are now working with 6 different EDBs to deliver cybersecurity services of an operational nature that will uplift the cybersecurity maturity of those organisations. What we're trying to achieve through all of this collaboration is uplifting the cybersecurity maturity of the entire industry, to be better prepared for cybersecurity incidents when they do occur, but also have those links in place to be able to share and to communicate during the events as they happen, and that will make us stronger together than if we were apart.
Thanks, Victor, for that video. It's fantastic to hear how you are collaborating with the other EDBs, but it is an incredibly pressing issue, not just for this sector, but for all of New Zealand. So I think you'll see people watching everywhere around that maturity. We're going to hear now from Simon McKenzie, who's the Chief Executive of Vector, on their EV trial.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, look, I guess with regards to our EV trial, our key objective was to really understand the impact of EVs on our network, in particular our low voltage network. Test whether or not smart charging can make a material difference to network from an investment perspective, particularly around how we're seeing it face into the future. In an uncontrolled environment, we anticipate that the demand on our network could go up by 250%. So, put that in context, our demand at the moment is approximately 1,800 megawatts. So that's a very material lift in demand. And so our objective is to understand how we can actually smooth that out and drop that by around 50%. So our results were really pleasing in the sense that it was really focused on the impact on customers and the ability to actually undertake the charging in conjunction with the customer needs, learn about their preferences, recognising that the trial covered around 200 customers, which is one of the largest conducted globally, and then look at the different ways in which the algorithms could learn to understand how we could better smooth that demand, ensuring that customers' vehicles are charged by the time they want them, typically obviously first thing in the morning, and then understand with those algorithms what benefit that actually confers onto the network, fundamentally to ensure there was a good customer experience, but also ensure that our network could be built in a much more efficient way than with a demand that was uncontrolled and essentially capital inefficient.
Thanks so much, Simon, and that's also just so fascinating, and the importance of data, which is a conversation we're hearing everywhere. So that's brilliant, thank you. We're now going to hear from Sean Horgan, who's Chief Executive of Waipa Networks, who's going to be telling us about ONT Telecoms data and how it's going to be used to assist mapping unplanned outages.
Awesome. Kia ora, Sarah. Thank you. So we, as Waipa, presentations. So we've gone, part of the challenge with decarbonisation is as customers rely more on electricity, how from a networks perspective do we support them and improve resilience? One of the challenges that we have as a network is not only getting closer to our customer to understand the genuine customer needs and what's driving our customers, but also being able to react by having access to endpoint data. Unfortunately, one of the challenges are the current market construct doesn't support us getting access to open data. And we ideally need access to that in order to get those very granular insights. It's not always economic to be able to build out that, so we need to look at alternative solutions. We've talked a lot about collaboration here in terms of other EDBs, but we're also collaborating with other infrastructure providers. So it's key to understand that the solutions don't always necessarily have to come from our sector. But it's also the speed at which we develop these solutions. Our customers have expectations in and around a solution that's delivered quickly. So the processes that we employ need to be able to respond to that, and we need to be able to respond quickly. So we've developed a proof of concept, a POC model, basically using data from our incumbent fibre provider, Tuatahi First Fibre, where we have quite a high penetration of fibre throughout our network, so about 80% of our customers have access to fibre. You compare that against smart meter rollout, we're at circa 85, so it's pretty comparable. So obviously when there's a power outage, the optical network terminal, the fibre point of connection goes dark, and they receive a signal. We then ingest that signal into our GIS system, and it provides almost an instantaneous update in terms of what areas are where there's an outage. So we went through this process in conjunction with our partners and have stood this up in about 6 weeks, again employing a different way of thinking. And this is a short-term solution to an immediate problem while we go through the process of investing in alternative systems. So the insight is we get access to data, we're able to respond quicker, and there's also a good outcome for Tuatahi Fibre as well, because their customers' experience is improved as well. So we've got a small illustration in terms of how this looks. So this was a car versus pole that resulted in an outage in Cambridge. The yellow bits outline those ONTs that have gone dark. We were able to respond to the first area. The second area turned out to be an underground fault, in part caused by that car versus pole, and we were able to go through the process of addressing that as well. So again, it provides us with a very quick indication of where those issues are, utilising infrastructure that's already out there, providing a better customer experience, and again, employing a process where we can stand up these sort of solutions in a relatively quick period of time. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Sean. And for the audience out there, I think these might be a rich area for questions, what Simon and Sean have been talking to around the system and what the systems that we need to support what's here now and what we know is coming. So pop your questions into the Q&A. So next we have a video from Counties Energy on Indie and data transformation.
Indie stands for Infrastructure and Network Data Interface. Essentially, Indie puts all of our smart meter data into the fingertips of internal users so that we can use that operationally. And it means that we can then have a singular view of every customer on the network. That means that we can respond proactively to faults, often before a customer has even knows that their power's gone off if they're not at home. During a storm response, we're then able to concentrate our efforts where there's greater amount of customers impacted, and also through our ping service, where we can actually ping a meter and see if it's healthy or not. It means that we can actually establish from our office if we need to send a truck there or not. So that has huge benefits when we're looking at decarbonisation. Counties Energy was quite early in the adoption of an advanced customer relationship management system. We've taken a lot of learnings out of that, and we've been able to share those with the Northern Energy Group and give some really good learnings, and they've then taken them on board during their implementation of their CRMs. Like other EDBs, Counties Energy takes safety at our highest priority. We regularly engage with working groups to ensure that we have aligned procedures and we collaborate with ideas. This means that we can all be driving for an improved safety culture and improved safety performance across the country. So Counties Energy has invested heavily in this space, and by moving first, we're able to demonstrate, and then our peers will be able to come in and learn from a lot of our learnings. Where the network operator needs to actually take into consideration peer-to-peer trading, all of those new technologies such as distributed generation, solar, batteries in houses and vehicles, and how that works together with the national grid. We know how important it is to transition, and we're doing what we can to help other companies move that way as well. It's all about leveraging systems, smart systems, that then can drive for improved efficiencies, greater uptime for customers, and of course, cheaper electricity.
What a fabulous video from Counties, and the investment that Counties is making in technology. In fact, all of the companies are making in technology with the consumer at the heart is so exciting. So we're now going to hear from Judy Nicol, who's Chief Executive of Counties Energy, and she's going to be telling us about their transformation from a distribution network operator to an efficient and effective distribution system operator, as well as their open loop system, which is their EV charging platform.
Ngā mihi, Sarah, and kia ora tātou. I decided to stay on a transformation and innovation theme, and as the last speaker to actually be the shortest speaker and let our Counties Energy video speak for itself. There's a deliberate reason for this, because while at one level the concept of a distribution system operator is very straightforward, it's not always that easy to translate into a conversation. And across the Northern Energy Group, this is a key work stream for us, and we are working through the possibilities to make a better energy future for our customers. And when we took the information out to stakeholders and to customers and started to talk about this, we realised that the overall low levels of energy literacy basically across Aotearoa means having this conversation is more challenging. So this video has been incredibly useful to allow us to start to unpick how energy works now and how it needs to work in the future and what our role is in that space. So through this video, the conversations that follow allow us to talk about digitisation, data, decarbonisation and the roll on to sustainable climate change, and that allows us to talk about the leadership space we have in creating a better climate and better outcomes. And it starts with people in their homes and their businesses. So having these conversations allows us to really start to emerge and engage with behaviours and with vision in this space.
As the energy sector decarbonises, technologies like EVs and distributed generation, such as solar and batteries, are changing the way our customers use electricity. Energy flow has always been in one direction, but this is now changing. Customers and communities are choosing clean and green technologies that allow them to generate, store and consume energy, making them prosumers. As the decarbonisation of energy increases, our role as a DNO will transition to that of a distribution system operator, or DSO. Through digitisation and active energy orchestration, our network will become smarter, enabling us to efficiently manage a greater volume of multi-directional power flow for businesses and homes. Transitioning from a network-centric operation into an active distribution system will unlock new opportunities in energy services for our customers and communities that are timely, efficient and cost-effective. Part of enabling greater energy choices for customers is unlocking the value from smart metering data. Real-time network information, usage and generation data will help us to actively orchestrate energy on our distribution system as an efficient DSO. By transitioning from a DNO to a DSO, we'll create flex and stretch in our network through energy orchestration to allow for customers' changing needs and to better serve our community. Our DSO will turn distributed energy resources, or DERs, on our network into flexible assets that can be managed and coordinated to enable our customers' decarbonisation efforts. This would be achieved while we operate within our network's capacity, increase network utilisation, and invest only in targeted upgrades. Counties Energy continues to work closely with regulators, DER aggregators, metering technology providers, and other electricity participants as we travel on our DSO journey. Counties Energy, working with you to reimagine energy.
I'll likely talk about open loop later, so this is a very brief, quick glance at an EV fast charger platform. One of the benefits of being part of the Northern Energy Group is that we are able to have inspire each other and excite each other about how we can be innovative and transformational. And this is an example of one of the initiatives we were able to come up with in Counties Energy and share across all industries and all lines companies. So I'll leave it there, Sarah, for now.
Oh, thank you so much, Judy. And I'm glad you mentioned leadership, because I do want to thank you all for your presentations. We're about to move to the Q&A session, so put your questions in now, people. I'm sure you've got lots of burning questions. But I do want to thank the panel for their presentations. And as I say, focus on Judy's note of leadership, because I think that all of these companies are showing real leadership in their commitment and investment to the future, all with collaboration and consumers at the heart. So thank you very much. I found all of those presentations so insightful. I know the audience will too. And so the next part of the session is actually a panel discussion, having seen those presentations. I've got one question for each of the chief executives, and then we're going to open it up for questions from our webinar audience. So Andrew, you're in the hot seat with the first question. With 29 EDBs, how can changes to enable the energy transition be made efficiently and in a timely manner across the whole industry?
It's a great question, right? And to me, this whole energy transition is a problem to solve. It's a puzzle to solve. And when I look around this room, I go, the capability, and this is just one part of our sector, is immense across companies. So North Power's, we have electricity networks, we have fibre networks. We also have a pretty big construction group, 1,000 people. We serve everyone here, plus a whole lot of the other EDBs. And I know companies come to us and say, how should we think about construction of this new stuff? The stuff that Simon can do in terms of asset management that I could only dream of, because we've got a pretty small engineering team. And I know our people are down here this week actually talking about criticality modelling and how you can do better modelling on networks to make them more resilient, in the face of this growth. And all of the examples we've seen here are just things, it's just like this, this great area of problem solving is to reach out to. Sean was talking about the fibre network automation. I haven't seen that. I haven't heard it. We've got a fibre network. I'll be back this afternoon to say, hey, how do we hook that thing up? Yeah. So I just think we're stronger actually in a collaborative mode, and the industry is so collaborative now. I can literally pick up the phone. My team can pick up the phone. If you see anything, you want anything, the answer is always yes, no problems. Come and see us. We'll give you that document. We'll give you that thinking. We'll give you that trial. And there's a real buzz around, I think, solving the problem together. So the industry is actually stronger in parts when we're collectively together, I think, is the answer.
Russell, you're next. Chief Executive of Top Energy. What challenges do you see for Top Energy with this level of intermittent generation that's on your network?
Yeah, it's huge for us. I mean, it completely changes the nature of our network. We talked about just domestic, 8.5 megawatts of domestic solar generation. Now our minimum consumption on the network's 28 megawatts. So we got 30% of it coming from domestic already. So I think the challenges really fit into three areas. The first one's about how are we fair with the new developers who want to come out and put a 20 megawatt generator on the network. And we hold that capacity for 18 months, and it's really difficult for them to turn that around in 18 months. If you apply for a resource consent just now, it's supposed to be a 20 working day turnaround. Well, that 20 working days has gone to 60 days before they even pick them up. So there's a long lead time for developers, and then we've got a queue of others. So how do we fairly deal with that so that we don't get to 18 months and say, right, you're out, next one in? Because they could be 3/4 or 90% of the way through the process. So I think the first one is really, how are we fair? The second is around our systems and the people capabilities that we've got. And we did an external review around that to say, well, if we're here now, where are we going to have to be in 5, 10, 15 years' time? And that identified that we don't have the people capability. We're well on the way to putting the systems in place. We've looked to other jurisdictions, and we brought a lot of knowledge across from Australia in particular, to make sure that we've got the systems to do that DSO part of it, because we're actually going to have to look through some of these generators and to control some of their generation output to get the connection point to the national grid right. And that's completely different for us. Identified a 10% gap in the people resource. So, I'd ask you to think about who's your network trader in your business now. Who's going to look at optimizing across your network and accessing distribution energy resources and trading those in a real-time way to minimize your spend on the network? We don't have that just now, but we've identified that that's where we're going to have to go to, and actually we're going to have to automate a lot of that stuff too. And the last is really around the culture within the control room. You go down to your control room, and they're used to running a network that's got a single way flow of energy. And that's actually causing some cultural issues for us, because you're not going to be able to put in a 3-week notice to say, well, we want to do this planned stuff on the network. This is happening real time. And even simple things for us, we've got a lot of diesel generation across the network to provide backup supply if we lose a 33 line. It's much cheaper for us to put a local diesel in than it is to build a second line. But just to manage those diesel gensets, that's a complete mind shift for our controllers. So it's really helpful for us because we're going through that now, because it's diesel gensets now, it's going to be solar in the future, then it'll be batteries and electric vehicles. But it's a completely different view of a distribution business and a control room. So I guess those would be the three areas.
Awesome. Thank you. Judy, I'm going to come to you now, Chief Executive of Counties Energy. We understand that all this work on smart control systems and smart meters is benefiting your customers. However, can you explain how organisations outside of the industry can take advantage of these innovations and the wider opportunities those innovations present?
Thanks, Sarah. One of the things we as a group don't limit ourselves to is being confined by our networks or our regional geographies. And the richness and why we came together is because we are stronger and better in sharing ideas, because as you pointed out, when we have nearly 50% of all ICPs that we're responsible for in this country, then we also feel a responsibility to think deeply about how we can come up with innovation and ideas and not just make them useful to our own customers, but right through. So you heard Simon talking about the EV trials and Russell talking about how EVs sit for you and your region. So in particular, in answer to this question, I talk about, again, the open loop, which is the one-stop shop application. And this is used by the Lines company. It's also used by WOW Networks. It's used by large companies, fleet companies. And what we're saying as a team, as a collective, is that we will come up with technologies that can be used for benefit right through. Another example is our Burn battery, which in Mercer we have got an EV charger and we're trialling charging that through Burn batteries, which are second life from the Sandleaf batteries. And so looking at ways to become more energy efficient and giving customers more choices. So that's an example of how we can go nationwide. In fact, we're not even limited. We're quite bold in our thinking. So while we are delivering for our regions in Aotearoa, I think some of the innovations that we're coming up with are applicable outside of this country.
I love the idea of that export, that's awesome. Going to come to Mike Fox, Acting Chief Executive of the Lines Company. Mike, the Lines Company's demonstrated a greater customer focus over the last 5 or 6 years with new pricing, billing via retailers and new technology, projects which you've actively collaborated on with industry partners and other EDBs. How else is the Lines Company looking to collaborate with EDBs?
Yes, Sarah. So we are looking more broadly now. We want to be able to learn from others and work with others, share some of our knowledge as well. So we've talked a lot about that collaboration aspect today. So being able to build on that as we engage with our customers on decarbonisation, understand what it is that they need. And a really simple example of that might just be working with neighbouring networks like Waipa as we engage customers, understand what it is that they need, and then how we're going to develop our networks from there, through to some of the other stuff that Andrew talked about earlier on in terms of some of the more technical end of town. So yeah, lots of opportunities there for us to build on that collaboration.
Awesome. Sean Horgan, Chief Executive of Waipa Networks. Will the uptake and impact of solar generation be consistent, do you think, across the EDBs, or is there less of an issue, for example, in areas like the Waikato, when you're not the sunny north and you have a few less sunshine hours in that region?
Yeah, good question to ask if anybody's enjoyed a Waikato winter, that's for sure. So, I mean, we clearly have less sunshine hours than the likes of Northland. But ultimately, the customer drivers are the same. The customers are looking to reduce their electricity cost. They are looking for, I guess, a degree of energy independence. And certainly there is a drive in and around sustainability. So we have around sort of 930 solar connections, and we've got 28,000 connections in total, and that is growing. But what we're seeing is property developers actually mandating solar as part of the covenant to go and buy a property lot. So there's that whole sort of sustainability move. We've got an area, St Kilda, where there's 200 plus lots, and each of those, it was mandated that there needs to be at least 3 kilowatts of solar. So from a network perspective, that provides some interesting challenges, and not least of all, it's 3 kilowatts today, it's 7-8 kilowatts moving forward, where there'll be a greater export volume. So, we need to work with the developers in and around how we support that from an infrastructure perspective. But yep, the sun definitely shines in the Waikato.
Simon Mackenzie, Chief Executive of Vector, coming to you now. I know you've undertaken collaborations with AWS and Google X. What was the basis on which they chose to work with you, with Vector, and what's the current status and most recent updates or opportunities?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, the relationship with AWS Strategic Alliance, it's a co-development of new energy platform really orientated around, you know, the ingestion analytics around data, particularly from smart meters, but also much wider than that. But if we look back to the reason why AWS, you know, sought to actually form that strategic alliance with us, I think it really came down to mindset and alignment about how we saw the future, and the fact that we actually were engaged in doing a lot of new things with technology and really focusing on customers' decarbonisation, which very much aligned with their strategic mindset as well. From that perspective, you know, we dealt with all the senior people in AWS, and, you know, from their strategic perspective, they were the ones that actually basically proposed to us that we form this strategic alliance. And so, you know, that's been a real privilege. We've got roughly 70 engineers working between us on building these platforms, some in New Zealand, some in Seattle, some in Atlanta. And then with Google X, pretty much the same thing. Google X is technically known as the moonshot factory. You know, we've got, you know, future jockeys, and they've got all kind of weird titles, but they are known as the moon factory. So it's really, for them, we had quite a, you know, reasonably lengthy relationship with a few of the guys in Google X. And in discussions with them, we were talking about, well, one of the real issues confronting the energy systems globally, as everyone's talked about, is customer expectations. The dynamics of energy systems going to change materially. Like Russell said, it's not a single directional flow, multi-directional flow. Big impacts coming in from other systems, whether it's wind or, you know, cyclonic rain events, dry year, all those types of issues. And so we said, well, actually there isn't the ability to take the systems, overlay that with data, do the analytics for both real-time visualization of the networks, but also for the longer term planning. So that meant that we actually work with them in ingesting all the network data, overlaying it with things such as Google Earth and a whole pile of other technologies that they've got access to, and we're co-developing with them. It's also got quite a lot of other, it's currently about 3 other large entities globally involved in the same trial, and it's not limited to an EDB, it's a whole system view. And, you know, what's also great is that, you know, the head of the division, or the co-head of it, is the ex-regulator from Australia, Audrey Zibelman. She was the regulator in New York. Then we've got one of the other members on the teams, the ex-CEO of PJM, probably one of the biggest networks in the world, you know, Pennsylvania. And so just the ability to interface and learn about what kind of solutions they're looking to solve globally, as well as how that overlays with what we're doing, is really exciting. Yeah.
That is super cool. That's very, very exciting. And actually that all of those factors that you're talking about, and these things driving towards strategic collaboration and alliances and working a very different way, is a conversation I think that we're seeing across all of the infrastructure sector, and it's really, this is like a snapshot of coolness. So
yeah, I think also, just to add to that, Sarah, I think one of the things is an observation. A number of us have been hanging around the hoop in the industry for a while now, but you know, you could have previously seen EDBs as a little bit of secret society of engineers. But, you know, one thing that I think we definitely say now is a massive transformation is the mindset and real focus on customers, communities, and we all have some differences between our networks, but there is still quite a lot of commonality, and I think a real shared vision about what we need to do for the future. Yeah.
That's fantastic. We're now going to open up for questions from our webinar audience. Just a reminder that if you'd like to ask a live question, then please raise your hand by pressing the hand icon in Zoom. And while we're waiting, we do have some questions that have been submitted already. Our first question is for Russell, and I think we'd also appreciate any views from Sean. And it relates to the equitable transition. And have you done much thinking about integrating local adaptation with decarbonisation? This question especially looking at rural communities that are vulnerable for a range of reasons, including storms. These communities are probably not able to set up commercially viable and climate change resistant energy systems and resilient energy systems. So I'll turn first to Russell.
Thank you. Thank you for such a long question to start with. The short answer is yes, absolutely. And particularly with iwi communities and developments of solar on Morais. So we have been working with a number of iwi groups, helping them develop their energy strategy and providing them with access to principally central government funding to help them make that transition. So that's the first thing that we've been doing. But in general, what I would say is that we're also identifying that the network's a thing that's going to balance everything, all these energy resources. You know, it wasn't that many years ago we talked about the death spiral of networks. No one's talking about that anymore. So the network's a thing that's going to balance it. And what we've identified is we need to make that as cheap as possible for all of the consumers on the network to give equal access to a very low-cost way of balancing all their energy input and output. So for us, we were very, very high cost. That drove us to diversify. We diversified into geothermal generation, and that's provided a lot of cash to allow us to both make the network investment, and our network cost went up from 128 million RAB to 320 million RAB. So we made the investments across the network, and now it's about driving down the cost per ICP. So we've gone from the highest cost in all of the EDBs. 2 years ago, we were the 6th highest. Last year, we were the 11th highest. And by 2026, or the 25-26 year, we'll be in the lowest quartile. And it's nice to join Waipa, Vector, and North Power in that lowest quartile. To provide the lowest cost per consumer connection. So we're very focused on getting our cost down as low as we possibly can to enable and open up that network for a whole range of other things to be delivered.
I might just accent that, Russell, because I think it's a great summary. And I've kicked around the industry for a while as well, Simon. I remember going 10 years ago across to the States, and they talked about this idea of community energy schemes, you know, getting together with your community and linking everyone up and having solar panels. We are community energy schemes. And that whole focus on a reliable platform, cost-effective platform to bring all this stuff to life is right where we live. So it's quite exciting to take what seemed like an out there thing about off to the fringes right into the middle and say, well, actually, this is our industry. These are community-owned networks. This is for Aotearoa in terms of decarbonisation. It's a cool mission to have, I think, as an industry at the moment. It's exciting.
Sean, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, and just picking up on the points that have already been raised, and I think from my perspective, absolutely. You know, we have an obligation, and part of that obligation comes from who we are. You know, Simon touched on it earlier. We're all here, community-owned, or have some form of community ownership. So not only do we have, I guess, the commercial imperative, and we've got a responsibility to keep the lights on, but we've also got this massive social imperative, which makes it an awesome place to work, an awesome space to work. So in communities where there are challenges, you know, absolutely we have a responsibility to support them through that process. And, you know, the point that was raised in the question, that can also support resilience and put ticks in the other boxes. I mean, you look at the work that Mike and TLC are doing in terms of Marae Solar. You know, they know the network, they understand the challenges. Solar, because of the quality of housing stock in some areas, it's not conducive to put solar on the home. Therefore, there's opportunities through Marae. So it's things like that local knowledge, that community imperative, that absolutely make it part of our responsibility.
Could I just ask a follow-up question, actually, of my own here? I hear you talking about the two-way flows and the solar investment and all of the data that you've got. Is this impacting your capital investment decisions, and how do non-built solutions come into those decisions, you know, which would presumably help drive down that cost to consumers? Who should I put that to? Russell, should I start with you again?
Thank you very much. Yeah, we do look at alternatives to network investment, and I suppose the biggest example that you have on the top energy network is the fleet of diesel generators that we have. So we've got about 18 megawatts of diesels across the network, and we've found that they are far more cost effective than building a second 33 line or a second 110 line to an area. So, you know, if we build the second line to Kaitaia, 110 line, it's about 45 million. We've managed to put diesel generation that will pick up almost all, but not quite, doesn't pick up JNL, and we can do that for about $50 million. So It's much more cost effective. You only use it when you're going to do planned maintenance on the line or if you've got a fault on the line. It's not quite there in terms of the reliability that you can provide through assets, but it's a much cheaper solution. So yeah, we definitely look at network alternatives, and my hope for the future is that those network alternatives will evolve, and we'll be able to access a market where there will be contestable services that we can buy in, and we'll buy rather than build. Now, the modelling that we've done through to about 2035 is that we can get through with the assets that we've got now if we can access that sort of market. But because the demand and energy consumption is growing through to 2050 as we decarbonise, we'll then have to start building assets again. So it's finite what you can do around deferring investments, and then you get to the point where you have to do your next step investment.
Simon, you've got a big challenge with that, with your big uplift in demand, so I'm sure you're looking at all options.
Absolutely. I think, as everyone's talked about, that, I guess historically there was almost like a planning mindset that the network's going to grow by 2%, and people didn't really deconstruct the network and really start thinking about what's going to happen in different parts of the network as much. What are the different impacts on consumers? And I think for us, particularly in Auckland, and the discussions we had and saw some of the information previously about things like deprivation, and when you're kind of staring down the challenges of having to do a lot of network investment, whether it's things like where EVs are going to turn up and you might have to reinforce that part of the network. Obviously with networks, it's the regulatory model is RAB times WACC, so those prices start getting socialised across everyone, and that becomes a real challenge. So we really got to actually say, how can we, as efficiently as possible, use data and analytics to understand how can we target that investment to get the least cost, and then think about pricing to overlay onto that, so people in those deprivation areas are not getting penalised by investment in other parts of the network. And Russell's example is a case in point. Just the other day we were asked about data centres. We've got currently either in construction or probable data centre load of 200 megawatts in the Auckland region coming in. And so again with that we have to target that investment but make sure that the network cost to actually reinforce that isn't socialised across all of Auckland. So that analytics and what we're all looking at for those solutions, learning from each other, I think is super critical.
Okay, actually our next question from the audience, Simon, is for you again. This is all very exciting and answers a lot of the concerns I have about the future energy demands. But in the interim, are we going to see further warnings from Transpower of overuse of power at certain times? And are we likely to see the sort of cost increases that have been signalled in the UK and Europe?
Jeepers, I think we better call 0800 Alison on that one. But, look, I think, I don't know. I mean, the information that we receive says that the system's pretty tight at the moment. I think whether or not we see further warnings is possible if the system is tight. I think one of the things from my perspective, there's a lot of talk about, we need these other solutions, we need the removal of the transmission pricing signals that were there. Has that made a difference? To me, I guess from a Vector perspective, we always very much focus on analytics and information, and quite frankly, I don't think there's enough information. There hasn't been enough analytics done to say, well, what's changed? Because when you look at it, we've had dry year now, we've got excess water, has demand actually moved much? We know that our demand in Auckland is lower than 21 and 19. So what is going on, and what is the generation mix? What's the availability of plant? Before we go rushing into developing all these other markets, we need that information. With regards to UK and Europe, I think it's fair to say that luckily as an island we're relatively insulated by what is clearly the impact of the Ukrainian situation and the energy conflict there in the UK. So yeah, hopefully we won't see 60% increases in gas or potentially higher. But that's not to say that what we've seen in Australia, we have to be mindful of. That's obviously not driven by the Ukraine, but it's driven by the dynamics of the energy market and system, and who knows, that could occur here.
That's right. You're in the hot seat, Simon. We have another audience question for you. I'll give you a break after this one. How do your current demand forecasts look against your network constraints? I think this is one of the things you were talking about with the demand forecast earlier. Are your current capital work plans and revenue paths on track to facilitate a smooth transition to net carbon zero by 2050? And where do you see the bumps in the road on that?
Yeah, I think pretty much, I think so. You know, we're reasonably confident about those kind of the forecasting and the network demands, but like with anything, you can never predict. And I think to the point about bumps and roadblocks is, you know, it's interesting just seeing what's happened with solar demand up in the northern region. You know, 6 megawatts going to 8.5, but in half the time frame. And it's those kind of trends. It's the, you know, tipping point type of issues and new technology and, you know, really quick adoption. And to the point, like Russell made, that to get the consenting, everything in place, that if you have to move quickly to be able to manage that demand's not always applicable. So I think that's the things that we really kind of focus on. But as a hedge or a policy to manage that, actually having that kind of systems that can control devices and manage them actually provides you some breathing room, as opposed to all of a sudden everything turning up and not being able to control it in the peak kind of sense. I think some of the other road bumps will be that if there isn't decisions made around ensuring that things such as smart EV chargers have to be connected into a system to assure you can get capital efficiency, then all of a sudden you get to a point where there's a proliferation of them that aren't connected. It makes it harder and harder to actually integrate them into a much smarter capital program. But
so when you're saying that decisions, are you saying a central, like a regulated decision?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, we've been advocating, as well as quite a few others in the industry. What we see in the UK, there's been an office for EV infrastructure for 10 years. We see that there's a need for, you know, the criticality of energy is going up significantly, as everyone recognises. You know, for New Zealand, the transformation of the transport sector into electrification is probably one of the biggest issues. That puts massive challenges onto the energy system. But to manage that efficiently from a network infrastructure side, we believe you need smart charging infrastructure connected to systems. So like in our case, you know, instead of a 250% increase in demand, we can drop it to 100%. Still going to be an increase, but it's a massive amount. And put that in context, our network, you know, from a regulated asset value is about $3.5 billion, but if you're going to multiply that by 2.5 times, that's a big increase in price to customers, but you know, 1 time is still a lot better than 2.5. So, but we need the decision making, and at the moment that's, I just don't think that's happening fast enough, and we just want to work with the government agencies and industry to get those decisions made. The decisions are made in the UK, they're made in South Australia, so we just need to not reinvent the wheel, we can pick them up quickly here.
Bit of collaboration for the system that's supporting all of this.
Yeah.
Judy, our next question is for you. A successful equitable transition will mean that consumers and communities will need to be considerably more energy literate. Recognising that this isn't only for EDBs to do, is there any thinking about setting up education platforms to help customers go from consumers to prosumers, which was the first time I'd heard that phrase, was in your video, being a prosumer. Efficiency is part of this too.
Yeah, great question, thank you. And I will start answering this question, but would invite this to be a team tag answer, because it's basically an answer that requires partnership. So when I think about our market, our model traditionally didn't require customers to have information. In fact, it was designed that way. However, the world has changed. So in terms of information and how this works, you know, my view is there is so much information that is driving and assisting us, supporting us to create a different type of outcome. You just put the TV news on these days and you see climate change initiative, you see countries underwater, you see all sorts of things. And so and that's because it's always a higher purpose. We exist because we're leading towards a better outcome. It's not just what we're doing locally. We have a vision and a purpose around this. So when you see that, how do we translate that information, which is basically education on a wider scale? How do we translate that back to communities? How do we translate that back to our customers? And that's what we're working hard on. So yes, we can do things like we've got customer advocacy groups, we've got education in schools, we run programs, we're trying to do training initiatives, all of those things which are what you would expect. However, in the way that the old barriers did not serve us in the way that we thought about our barriers, and we've moved into a world where those traditional barriers, historical barriers, don't work for us because the world works differently now. In terms of education, the way we work together, the way we work collaboratively up and down the country, and the way we're thinking about at all points of contact, making that a meaningful point of contact. So that means, we start with where our customers are at. It's that basic and that respectful. Yep. So whether it's the way Mike is working with the local marae and doing an amazing job in transitioning, understanding and thinking versus just sophisticated customer advocacy panels, there are so many touch points, and we need all of them, all at once and all the time. So my colleagues may have some views on that.
I'd like to pick up on actually directing it to Mike, because I think, as we said, the deprivation statistics that you presented in your presentation were so confronting, and education must be an enormous part of that extremely cool solution around equitable energy. Do you want to add to Judy's?
So I guess, so for us that education piece is really important, and we've made that transition to retailer billing in line with the rest of the industry, but making sure that we continue to be engaged with our customers. So we have a dedicated customer and community engagement team. We've made that conscious decision. They're sort of out there engaging with the community, understanding what it is that their specific needs are, but also how we can help sort of educate them and bring them along for the journey.
Russell?
Thanks. I just thought I'd give two practical examples of the sort of thing that we've done. So we go out to the AMP shows every year when we can have them and COVID doesn't stop them. Yeah. But we have a tent out there, and we have someone on an iPad from the business, and we allow customers to come with a bill and just take them through the what's my number process. And a lot of people really, it's a relatively simple process, but they still really struggle because the electricity sector is not simple to understand. Our consumers still think we're the blooming power board. They don't understand retail. They don't understand that the meters in my network are owned by Well Networks in Hamilton. So it's difficult to get your head around. So we do that education. We do it on a one-on-one basis, as Judy said, because you have to directly engage with the customer. So we get a team of people who go out, who talk to them. The other thing that we do is we've partnered with Northern Rugby Union, because a lot of people in New Zealand like rugby. And when we looked at who could be partnered with, it's got a fantastic reach out into the community through those local rugby clubs where they come together, they look after the pitches, they got a social event afterwards. Can we get into those groups and add value to them by helping them understand their bills and going through and getting the cheapest retailer? And we've had some real success from those programs.
I expect that helps building trust as well.
Yeah. And just picking up on the points that have been made before, and also tying into that initial question around community ownership. I mean, we are, particularly in the rural areas, the energy company that has feet on the ground. Many of the other electricity companies don't have a physical presence, and it's so important, to the point that Russell was making, that you're actually out there communicating and demystifying what electricity is. So, and again, the ownership structure that we have and the fact that we're located where the people are, we can support them.
And maybe just to build on that, we've had similar programs our teams are doing. It's actually ECA and MB funded. It's a program where we go and sit in people's homes and take them through the same thing. And stunning results. The cost of that process of, and we do similar things, what's cost you energy, what are your options, what would LED light bulbs do? We're spending about $100 per sit-down session. The return for the families we're working with is on average $500 per annum. So the payback of sitting down with people is huge. And also for our staff, it just personalises the whole thing, right? Our whole mission is we're there for customers, we're there for communities. Going and sitting with families is a great way to just remember what you're there for. So I think the fact we're on the ground, we are a community platform, we are community companies. The more we spend time with families and communities, the more it's real and the better result we get, I think. So, yeah, isn't it cool to hear all the stories around the circle?
It's so cool, yeah. And actually, in the briefing that I was given around the energy group before, I know that one of your key goals is actually simplifying it for the customer and taking away the complexity for the customer. And having a look at your various presentations, you can see the complexity internally within your organisations is shooting through the roof. And with the goal of simplifying that for your consumers is extremely exciting. Very, very cool. Okay, Mike, we've got another question from the audience for you. With a mix of accessibility to smart meter data across the NEG and hearing this as a key enabler to decarbonisation, DER management, system reliability and peak load management, how does the panel see this being solved across Aotearoa New Zealand?
Good question. I think for us as EDBs, we know that the impact of DER is going to be felt most acutely on the low voltage part of the network, and we're quite privileged with TLC, and likewise with counties, we've got a lot more visibility than some of the others around the table here. So finding a way where we're able to access that data cost effectively without having to invest another bucket load of money essentially, and having that technology in people's houses. So that's through the existing smart meters that are there, making that information readily available to the rest of the industry is going to be a key part of delivering that.
Collaboration at the heart for this group. It's fantastic. We have another question from the audience for Simon. Simon, it's great to hear about collaboration. There are real benefits for customers from increased operational standardisation across businesses. Exclamation mark. How are you viewing the role of the network versus the role of retailers in managing demand?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that from a network perspective, I guess, as we talked earlier, that the role is, because of the transition that we're all facing with different kind of dynamics, that it's really important first and foremost for us to understand what are those customer needs, how do they actually show up in different parts of our networks, and then looking at that through the lens of, from a network cost, what is the way in which we can deliver the most efficient network from a cost perspective for that transition. And I think that that's really important. And so therefore, if we look at things such as EV charging infrastructure, we look at that as a kind of a separate issue. So it's around EV charging infrastructure. We think of a device on the wall, and they could be provided by, for example, the vehicle manufacturer through to a company that wants to provide that as a solution, or a retailer. Whereas the network infrastructure, the reason why we want to actually be able to control that is to manage the cost of the network infrastructure, but not actually mean that there isn't a market for competition for the EV charging and how the products and services get created off that. And so how that comes together for us is that we do see, just because of network economics, network behaviour and everything else like that, there needs to be a system that actually can manage the network requirements. And then through digital technology now, that we are privileged to be able to see what can be done in that space through our partnerships, the ability to provide the open architecture and access to information and control systems that operate in parallel with the ones that you need for the network is how we see the future. And I think that's something that, quite frankly, people don't kind of understand enough, that there isn't a lot of what I'd say the ability to understand what digital platforms can do now, because historically they're looked at very much silo kind of orientation, as opposed to being able to provide multiple uses.
Did you want to add something, Judy, to that?
No, just agreeing.
Okay, so we've only got 10 minutes to go, so get your questions in while you can. It's incredible to have this panel together, so pop them in the Q&A part of the website, or whatever that thing is. Russell, another question for you from the audience. As a customer who is looking to put in solar power at home and purchase an EV, does this group provide information and guidance separate to the sellers of the systems who may not have expertise required?
Okay, well, I'll answer for Top Energy, and maybe some of the others might want to jump in afterwards. We don't actually. What we found when we saw the first sort of rush of solar to come in across the network was that some of the installers were less than fulsome in the information that they provided, and that some of the spreadsheets on the financial benefits weren't particularly realistic. So we made a call at that point that we would look for a centralised source of truth or a centralised model to go to, and we promote those models rather than engaging directly with those consumers to make those choices. So there's some really good stuff on through ECA, and we found that it's useful to send customers to that sort of information where it's independent, and then they can make the best choices.
Okay.
I might, if I could just build on that, I agree with Russell. I think distributors becoming the central source of truth for the economics is problematic. But what our network does do is we get all of the solar providers together. We have a group that meets pretty regularly now, and the whole focus of that group is to say, how do we get accurate information into the hands of consumers, and if we're off selling solar, how do we make sure the representations are accurate and reliable? And there's mixed, there are mixed approaches, but we've found by getting those, actually the different suppliers around the table and having an honest discussion, that what we want is good information, a good experience, a long-term success for solar. Yeah. It's been a really, really good discussion, and some of the times when perhaps the installers were pointing at us as a network and saying, oh, it's all very, very difficult, we've ironed out those kinks and made it a better process. So I think sometimes it's as much about getting the ecosystem to work together and have a joined-up story as it is to being able to go to a website and get the actual answer on a spreadsheet. Albeit that's really, really important. People can do that. Yeah.
Excellent. As you know, my day job's a lawyer, so accurate and reliable representations is something that we deeply like. We have a question for Judy. Will there be standardised event pricing signals across the networks for aggregators to schedule batteries and EV charging?
What you didn't see happening then was a very intense discussion happening at this end of the panel around our role in speculating on market decisions, and I'm actually going to hand that to Simon based on the discussion we just had off camera.
That's not quite what we agreed. Look, I think the reality is that when we're talking about pricing signals, then first and foremost, it's what's occurring in the wholesale market. How does that overlay into what are the solutions that different retailers may have with their customers? And then how does a demand aggregator actually interface with that? So I think that's not quite as simple as saying there'll be a standardised pricing structure. Equally, because, I think that's one of the things which everyone can do better on education, is saying that what's believed to be these material benefits from, let's say, for example, deferred capital expenditure. It's not always relevant because there's not necessarily revenue available for deferred capital expenditure from the regulatory model. So I think that there's clearly a need to have, first and foremost, a common understanding around what are the types of areas that there can be demand signals, and also how does the value get identified for that. And historically we used to have transmission pricing signals. We had embedded generators in our networks that you could actually identify when a time was appropriate for them to be operating, and if they're operating they could achieve a benefit. But with those signals being removed, that's another area gone. So I think it's quite a complex topic, and I think there's a lot of misinformation about where all this value is that needs to be kind of discussed and understood, because there are regulatory settings that overlay with the network economics, and some of these things are very transient. So, for example, if you've got a network area that needs a deferral, the deferral benefit will last as long as that available flexible load can be there, but sometimes when that's used up, then you have to invest in new capacity, and that new capacity has typically got quite a bit of headroom just because of the efficiencies of investment. And so then all of a sudden you go from a benefit to no benefit So the investment decisions on the demand aggregator is quite complex as well.
Yeah, Russell.
I have a view on this. And my view is there's a bit in the middle that's missing at the moment. So we talk about the benefit stack. Lines companies will benefit, retailers will get a benefit, consumers will get a benefit out of this. But there's no centralised market for it. And until you have that market, what do I do if I've got a constraint? Who do I go to? You know, put an RFP out to the market, and we've done this. We got 2 responses for it. So no ability to defer that investment. And if we're talking about a future state where we're doing this on a real-time basis and we're managing constraints on a real-time basis, it's that centralised market that we need. And until we've got that, no one's going to get that stack of benefits. So that, for me, is the missing piece.
Yeah, I agree, Russ. Yeah.
As I say, my day job's a lawyer and I do regulatory and policy settings all the time. So this is the bit that gets super interesting to me. But actually, I do think that's a really interesting area around how the regulatory frameworks currently, how is that system responding to what you need? You guys are looking into the future. If you had a magic wand, what would you do? Russell, your centralised market?
Well, from a market's point of view, I think a centralised market around DER, similar to the reserves market, is a gap. I think standardisation around EV charging and solar and allowing those only to be put in place if we've got remote access to them so that they can contribute to that market is another gap. I think regulated lines business, solving for regulated lines business on lowest lines charged to consumer, it's a bit nuanced, but we've got to move away from that, and we've got to introduce a view on decarbonisation as well. Because otherwise we'll just do the incremental pieces and we'll optimise in the short term when we've actually got a 2030 or 2050 year view on this. We invest in assets for 50 or 60 years, not for the next 5. So for us, a very simple example, I should be building lines when I come to asset replacement. I shouldn't be making them smaller as they go out from the substation. That's how they're built at the moment. We need to enable someone at the end of it to put generation in and be able to feed back through. It's not really allowed for in the regulatory framework. So I think something around not just solving for those lowest line charges, but also allowing for investments to be made to enable decarbonisation in the future is also really important.
I agree with that, Russell. And I think we have to say there's some huge targets out there in time, 2050, 2030. They require big investments and they require the market to operate really decisively. And so we have to be prepared to say, you've got to build the infrastructure ahead of connecting the generation plant and ahead of putting everything on top, or we just won't be ready. We can act really, really quickly now. I think the industry is actually good at deploying capital, making decisions, building things, getting it in the ground. That's a nice tight delivery. But if we spend too many years discussing how the regulatory rule should work and we don't start, we're going to miss the boat. So I think a willingness from us all to say, let's look at the end game in terms of the decarbonised economy, the investments required. Let's work out the track on that and let's make some decisive moves to say, cool, and invest ahead of demand. That's really our case on renewable energy zones. We're saying the resource is there. We actually know how to upgrade the networks to do it. The retailers are queuing up to connect it. So let's get on the ground, let's pilot, let's make it happen. Let's not get too caught up in the complexity. Yeah. Let's find the solution and then build the regulation around the solution rather than the other way around. So it's all about a little bit of looking down the road and a bit of decisiveness and a bit about owning that long-term position.
I think just a couple of thoughts just to supplement. That one of the other challenges is that when we kind of look at the path, there's got to be, I believe, for everyone, a mindset shift away from what's going to happen with prices on lines, what's going to happen on prices on transmission, what's going to happen on that. Because if we just take that, transition of electric vehicles, it should be looked at what is the energy wallet transition, because it's really, problematic if it's just this focus on, to Russell's point, the lowest lines charge possible. Whereas actually, there's going to have to be a lot of network investment, there's going to have to be generation investment, but that should be offsetting the massive costs of, fuel imports. And so if we look at it, how does that play out as a whole system and an energy wallet to consumers, that actually just changes the lens slightly, and I think that's really critical. Otherwise, we'll just be in this incremental game again.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm getting the big sign to wind up.
Oh.
Sorry, you think an hour and a half's a long
Yeah.
time. Turns out
Yeah.
it's not at all. So we are out of time, and apologies to the questions that we didn't get to. Thank you so much to all the attendees, and I hope you found this interesting and exciting. I certainly did. An enormous thank you to the CEOs. You can see the leadership that's being provided in this sector, and I'm very pleased I live in this northern region. So a reminder that this will be the first event of many events over the next year, supported by the ENA. Ngā mihi, thank you very much.